Here I did not tone my surface and started blocking in with white background. For absolutely no reason at all. For the background underpainting, I used raw umber, ochre, and a little bit of blues to communicate the distant trees. And I tried to avoid details, hard edges, and high chroma greens and yellows when painting background elements, as it could kill distance or depth. Here I map out the darkest foreground elements using my darkest color, which is a mix of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. Of course, these placements can change as I go on with painting. I then mask in the mid and foreground grasses and leaves. This is when I start to mix in some yellows, while keeping in mind to use less and less yellows as I go further into the background. Here I'm mapping out the major shapes of colors of the water surface while being mindful of the objects that reflect on the surface to the viewer's eyes. Here I'm putting in some tree trunks and branches that I want to be partially hidden underneath the leaves. When this layer is dry, I'll then come back to paint the leaves over it. I then put some greens to communicate clumps of leaves almost like in a random fashion, while observing for some odd shapes or patterns that you might have accidentally created, because this might affect how natural things will look. I also find that I have to observe this when painting skies or water ripples. That's why I think it is important to take 2 to 3 steps back to look at your painting every once in a while painting. Here, I'm starting to show the basic shapes of the distant rocks and fallen logs, and I make it as simple as possible. I only use the values, the shadows, and highlights. This way I avoid too much rendering, which, again, may kill the depth in the painting. Here I'm starting to detail the foreground elements, and I basically am observing the different surfaces of rocks from my references, trying to communicate how light reflects on different textures of rock surfaces, some rough, some smooth, some have moss, and either wet or dry. One helpful observation I found is that most wet surfaces will have planes or edges that reflect the sky colors to the viewer. Now I'm painting tree details in the foreground. One thing I find important is that the color mixes will get more saturated. Also, you'll start to see cooled leaves or portions of leaves. What I'm referring to are the leaves that you still see but are not hit by the main source of light in your painting, which, in this case, the sun. So these leaves only receive reflected lights which are mostly from the other side of the sky, which the sun is not in. So to represent these, I put random marks of cool greens along with the warm greens. Now these are observations that we can deeply understand when painting plein air. So maybe the next video I post will be me painting in plein air. That would be it for this piece. I hope y'all like the final result. Thanks for watching.